I'm really happy to have the opportunity to talk to the artists Natalie Taylor and Christine Jakobek today, and I will jump right in. Natalie, please tell us something about your project in Weimar.
Yeah, sure. So this artwork, Foodbank for Pollinators, is an urban landscape art intervention in Weimar, and it's made with the very ordinary tools of gardening, the spade, the rake, and some seeds. It's simple technically, it responds to the place and the time, and it's specifically planted for pollinating insects. So we've used native German wildflower seeds for plants, which I believe it used to be quite common in the countryside there. And I've titled it Foodbank for Pollinators as it's a reference to the lack of food our flying insect cousins are experiencing right now due to their habitat loss and chemical insecticide use. The artwork was created last month in late May and will change considerably over the next few weeks and months, changing from the blank dark letters into the ones which are covered in leaves and hopefully later flowers. So I'm hoping that people in Weimar will see the change from this monocultural landscape of grass, where there's very little food for our insect friends, to one which is rich in pollen and able to support a wide variety of different insect species. So this is, of course, just a tiny little piece of land in the city, but it is one which is quite central and often visited or driven past, as it's quite near to a big shopping centre in Weimar. So I'm hoping that it will really be seen by a large number of residents. And the message I've shown of Rewild is a provocation, or perhaps even a plea to the local people to start rewilding their own gardens and to ask local park managers to rewild the pathways, the verges, or the borders and help support the local insect populations. The piece was partly in response to the report I read from 2017 made in Germany from Krefeld, and it was an entomological society from Krefeld, which studied over 27 years the numbers of insects in some conservation areas around Germany, and they found that 75% of those insect populations had dropped. So there was 75% less insects than there had been 27 years before that. And that's really alarming because so many species in the wild are completely reliant on eating insects, birds. It's really alarming in terms of what that means for the wider ecosystem. But we can stop this if we now start to plant more insect supporting species and stop using chemicals so much. And we're really living in an era of tremendous potential for change. So that's what this artwork is speaking about. And in terms of the kind of social aspect of the work, I'm really hoping that it will galvanize people and sort of start a conversation locally in Weimar and perhaps also on the wider, on the internet and so forth, about what is rewilding and what does it mean to somebody, why would you rewild an urban landscape and how can that be done? What does that mean in terms of our everyday lives and what simple things can we do with rewilding in mind to help nature become more restored and grow back again?
Yes, that would be great. I also really hope that it will resonate. I think there are more and more people getting aware of insects, of our nature, our environment. So yeah, that would be great. Christine, you did a similar project, a short film we are going to watch after our talk. So can you tell us something about that project?
My artwork is a video artwork called A Toothless Grin. And as a video artwork, it exists purely online. And the title, A Toothless Grin, is kind of referencing this idea of a void or this feeling of emptiness that I see kind of increasingly existing in everyday life. And I personally see that also due to our detachment or growing detachment from nature. So I think my artistic approach in this video is also an idea of rewilding, but in a very different way. So whereas Natalie's work is in a way feels almost participatory or very real life, working with actual dirt and actual grass and actual animals and actual nature. My work is referencing the idea of nature and using nature as kind of this pure entity and as an antithesis to digitalization. So in a nutshell, what the film is about is alienation through digitalization, alienation from ourselves, each other, and nature. So I use nature as this this special antithesis to digitalization, this pure place that can kind of almost heal us and bring people back to a more real life interaction with the everyday. So in that way, I do think that it's quite it's different, but it's also in a way very similar, I think, to Natalie's work, because it has kind of also an appeal or a prompt to the audience to say, like, can we reconnect with the natural world, and isn't that actually really important? Yeah.
So you are two female artists who are treating similar subject, but in a very different way, with a very different approach. Do you think that being part of different generations has something to do with it?
Yeah, it does feel like we're from different generations in a sense. I was born in the 1970s, so like a period when there was still, you know, huge amount of wildlife around. You know, you would drive from Edinburgh to London and you would have to stop several times in the car to wipe the windscreen, sort of all the splattered insects would be off, and my dad would get out the, you know, the sponge, and he would be like bringing water and making sure that you could see, because it was like literally wiped over the windscreen. So, and you know, you would have hedgehogs in the garden, it was quite normal, whereas like I haven't seen a hedgehog for decades now. You know, it's really quite a rare species to see here in the UK. So I feel like that's probably quite a big generational divide in terms of what kind of animals and how many species young people these days are exposed to. So I guess I came from a like really lucky kind of period, in the sense that I grew up, you know, every summer I spent barefoot wandering around by the rivers and just experiencing sort of the wild nature, you know, like in everyday life for most of my summer holidays. So I'm really kind of fortunate, and I really hope that younger generations still have the chance to really interact with nature in that sense.
Yeah, I also think that's bringing it to a good point, that our approaches are, I think, generationally different because we have different experiences. My generational view that I brought into the video artwork is showing things as representations, and how that becomes increasingly abstracted, and how there's, I think, this also lost even perception for understanding that this is only a representation. We've become so accustomed to being like, that's a flower because, you know, that's a flower, but no, that's a flower behind a screen that you're not actually seeing. So I think that's also something that is a generational shift that is happening so slowly in a way, but at the same time so massively and so omnipresently that you hardly even notice it. And I think that's really also the interesting thing between our works, is that we're dealing with a similar topic and we're trying to give a similar message, but in very different ways. And I think that does definitely mirror a generational difference.
Yeah, I think that's really true. And I think that yeah, with the sort of you know, the new generation coming up now, you know, I think it's even more important for all generations that are older than them to try to reconnect them back to not just this representation of the flowers and this, you know, the forest, but actually take them to experiencing, so they can smell and touch and even taste nature for themselves, so it becomes real. Because I think that only when you are familiar with something and then come to care for it, then you can protect it. But I think if you haven't experienced it firsthand, then you have no real kind of desire or like idea of why you would want to protect something that you've never experienced firsthand. And I think that, you know, we're human beings, we're animals, you know, deep down we're actually, you know, we are animal creatures, and I think that we are hardwired to be able to respond to the smells and the sights and the sounds of nature. That's in our DNA. So I think that it's so important to try and reconnect really young children to that as much as possible.
Natalie, Christine, thank you so much for this inspirational talk, your insights. I can't wait to go to Weimar and see the flowers growing. But first, we are watching the video by Christine Jakobik, A Toothless Grin. Enjoy the artwork.